Hey everybody, welcome back for another video. I'm going to make a new video series for you guys here on the YouTube channel. This will be video one of that YouTube series, of a video series, which would be how to analyze your own swing. So I'm going to go over some steps that you guys can do on your own to analyze your own swing, so you can see what you might have to work on, and then how to work on those certain things. And this will be very, very general. Again, a lot of people swing very differently, but this will be more of a general overview of how you can take a look at your swing. How can you start implementing changes, and what to look for to help the biggest demographic of people. Okay, so in this video, we have a very typical amateur golfer, someone who's outside in, not very fast, and he has a lot of common issues that I've seen with a lot of my clients, which is being over the top, very narrow backswing. So when he started, so this is lesson one, he was 74 club speed, 83 ball speed. So the club to ball speed ratio is actually quite low because the contact was so bad, and a lot of it was contributed because he was so outside in. He needed a very open face of impact to make a functional ball flight. In addition to that, he was 6 degrees down with a 7-iron, which is a little bit too steep for my liking at his speed, and then he's 3.5 degrees outside in. So when we look at this, and again, I'm going to make a series about this. This is just strictly setup and backswing. Okay, this is just lesson one. We're going to go over setup and the backswing. In the future videos, we'll go over some downswings that you can look for, different variations of the downswings that you guys can kind of employ for yourself in future videos. So this will be video one of this Analyze Your Own Swing series, talking about the setup and the backswing. So we're gonna play his swing first. This is lesson one. Down the line, you can see he's very common, which he lifts up, narrow, over the top, very steep with the shaft, cuts across it with an open face, and that's how he gets to play golf with a decent ball flight, because if his face was square, he would hit it way left. This is the face-on video. I'm sure a lot of you guys will see common themes with your swing and this guy's swing. If you're someone that struggles with ball striking, when he makes his backswing, he doesn't turn much, and his upper body is tilted towards the screen in comparison to his lower body. So he doesn't turn, he tilts towards the target, not what we want. So we'll go over some starting points first. So beginning with a setup. So with a setup, what I don't like with a setup is his hands are a little bit too close to his leg. Okay, there's not much room here to start in between his hands and leg. In addition to that, he has a little bit too much knee bend, which makes him have too much weight in the toes. So what we did was move him into a little bit less knee bend, as you guys can see, which helped him be a little bit more in his heels, and we increased the amount of space he had between the hands and legs. That just gave him a little bit more room for the hands to work in a little bit in the takeaway, because if you turn properly with not much lift, your hands should go a little bit more inside. So that's one of the first things we worked on in the setup, which is less knee bend, so he's more in his heels, and have a little bit more space between his hands and legs. That way, again, a little bit more space for him to work his hands in. That's step one. So if you're someone that struggles with ball striking, I would really take a look at where the weight is first at setup, making sure you're more on your heel side, making sure you don't have too much knee bend or your hands are not cramping your legs too much. That would be step one. From the face-on view, we can also see some big changes in the setup where when he sets up, his upper body on the video on the left is actually a little ahead of the lower body. So if you stand straight, just standing straight as posture, your sternum be in your upper center, and let's just call your middle of your pelvis your lower center, it should be one on top of each other. But what he does here is his upper center, his head, his upper center, and lower is actually a little bit left of his lower center, leaning towards the target, which I don't want. In addition, his setup is actually a little bit too narrow for my liking. The feet's too narrow. It's hard to make an athletic move at it just because the feet are so close together. So what I had him do is I had him widen his stance. What he feels like is wider than his shoulder width is actually pretty much his shoulder width, and his upper body is more center on top of his lower center, which I like. So I typically like upper body being on top or slightly behind or away from the target than the lower body is. I don't like the upper body leaning towards the target. So you can see quite a few changes there. And then one more thing we did with his grip was, you can see the video on the left here. It's hard to see because there's a little bit not close enough, but he has a little bit of a gap between his right palm and his left hand. I don't like seeing gap at all. Okay, so you can see the video on the right, the picture on the right here, which I took a picture of his new grip, is now there's not much gap between his right hand and left hand, which I like. In addition, as a result, it moved the V between his right thumb and his right index finger now points more towards his right pec, which is what I like, right pec to sternum, and then the left V between his left thumb and index finger will go towards the right armpit, just as a general rule of thumb. I like stronger to neutral grips. I don't generally like weak grips for most players. It's not a be-all end-all, but for most amateur players who struggle with common issues, I like a little bit of a stronger grip. And then, so that's that. So that's just a rundown of what you should really look for with your grip and your setup. Grip 2.5 knuckles or so on your left hand, and then not much gap between the two hands. And then look for the V's between your hands to point at the appropriate spots. So once you got that out of the way, we went into the backswing a little bit. So I'm gonna put the beginning down backswing on the beginning swing on the left and the new swing on the right. So when you watch a swing on the left, he lifts his head, kind of tilts and dips and moves towards the target, while he lifts his hand, right arm folds a lot. So you can see at the top of his backswing, the club is pointing at, let's say, 2:30. So if this is 12 o'clock and this is 3 o'clock, you can see the club is kind of pointing at maybe like 2 o'clock or so, 2 o'clock, which I don't like. In addition, his right forearm, you can see, is very folded, roughly 60 degrees to the ground or so, which is a little bit too much bend for my liking. Generally, the more your right arm folds, the narrower you get. The more you hinge, the narrower you get, which I don't like. When you watch the video on the right, where we're working through a drill, at the top of the backswing, you can see his right arm is a lot more wide here. So not as bent, roughly 80 degrees to the ground. So as a general rule of thumb, I like being pretty close to 90 degrees to the ground. Doesn't have to be exact, but I prefer that for most players if they're wide enough. I like their left arm covering their shoulders, which he has done a good job of even with the old video. However, you can see with the old video, because he folded so much, his hands are on top of his shoulders, compared to right now, his hands are more behind his shoulders because he has more depth now. He's getting the depth because he's not folding as much, and he's turning a lot better in the backs, and what you're going to see in the face-on video. I also like seeing more of the shaft, because now I know he's not too hinged, and we've talked about this being 12 o'clock. Now his club is more at 11, 11:30, which is what I also prefer to see for most players. So this is what I really, really like. So to get here, which is the more important question, we do a drill to help him set things up, okay? So I had him bend his right wrist to get the shaft parallel, which is just you bending your right wrist backwards. I don't prefer the vertical hinge for a lot of players who struggle with being steep. I have them bend their right wrist back, and that generally takes care of the hinge. And clean up the wrist structure. So you can see at the top of the backswing on the left, his left wrist and right wrist is pretty similar, both slightly cupped. I like left wrist flat, right wrist bent at the top of the backswing for most amateur players. So from here, we create that structure very early. We right wrist bend is shaft parallel, where the club is in line or slightly outside the hands, which I like. And the toe of the club is pointing at, let's say, 11 o'clock, 10:30 from the player's point of view, which usually means the face is square. So from there, you've established your structure. Your left arm is straight, your right arm is slightly bent, right wrist bent, left wrist flat. That's all you need. Everything is in front of your torso. You want to maintain that. The structure should be nice and firm and engaging in front of your torso. So all you do from here is just turn. The structure moves in unison with the torso turn. Do not let the arms structure move faster than the torso turn, which is what a lot of people tend to do who struggle. I want it moving together. So now at the top, that's how we get that look at the top. And eventually, I'm going to clean things up a little bit. I'm going to get things a little bit more pronounced, where we see a little less shaft, just to get the club a little bit closer to parallel to make a fuller swing. But for now, this is a great start for lesson 1. From the face-on view, you're going to see whoops, you're going to see a big difference. This is a really big difference here. So video on the left is the first swing. You can see upper body, his head and upper body tilts, dips towards the ball and the screen, which I don't want. He lifts, his hips work away from the target, which I don't like. And as a result, at the top of the backswing, that doesn't look very right. Doesn't look very correct. Doesn't look very athletic. Upper body is tilted towards the target. Not very good. Compared to the video on the right here, what we did actually first before we got to this is learn how to turn properly. So I had him put a club across his shoulders, okay, and all I asked him to do was feel like he turns with his left shoulder rising. So this does look like a very flat turn, too flat in reality, but we had to exaggerate that. We had to exaggerate his left shoulder rising so much so that he can not have his left shoulder dip down so low. So what happened on the video on the left is generally people feel like they have to keep their head steady. When they try to keep their head steady, they restrict their movement. And as a result, this happens where the movement isn't correct. The head actually isn't steady. They can't turn properly. You have to give yourself freedom to turn properly. So from here, I asked him, he can feel like he moves his head off the ball if he wants. Turn left shoulder rising a lot and turn his right hip back as he lets his right leg straighten and loose flex. If you let your leg has to straighten and loose flex for your hips to turn properly. So you can see here, now his leg is one line here, okay? On the video on the left, his leg is two lines. So his thigh and his shin doesn't match up. You should have your thigh and shin match up like the video on the right if you turn properly, okay? And whatever flex your right leg loses, your left leg will gain. That didn't happen on the video on the left here, where when he made that backswing, all he did was slide the hips, left knee collapsed in. Doesn't look very strong because the weight got outside the right foot. So now that we've exaggerated, so going back to the video on the right here, now that we've exaggerated the turn, where it feels like he turns left shoulder rising. Now when we get to the actual video, you can see that doesn't really happen. But he actually does turn with proper tilts now. So you can see it, if I play this for you guys, left shoulder is definitely lower than the right, which it should be, but it's not significantly lower. We also see much more turn. You can see the back, no problem, because he's actually turning. You don't see any of his back on the video on the left because he's not turning. He's just tilting. So his tilts are off on the video on the left. His tilts are actually correct now. He's turning in relation to his incline and setup, which is what we want. And you can see as well, if I draw lines beside his hips, that setup, you can see that he turns more centered in between them on the right, on the left. His hips slide away, which we don't want. On the right, he turns within them, turning into the inside right heel. Right leg loses flex, left leg gains the flex. Great relationship, great turn. I love that. This looks way more powerful on the right. And then that's the rehearsal. And then even when he actually performs the movement, he actually does it really well, which you guys can see. Is a one motion swing. He turns on the inside right heel. Excellent. And you can see when we get to the top, he turns, left shoulder feels like it rises, but it doesn't. Great turn, great, maintains proper tilt, great width here. And eventually, I want this closer to 90 degrees between his left arm and club, which we'll get to eventually. But for now, that's not the main concern. The main concern is making sure he turns properly. So now his upper body is slightly centered, maybe slightly behind the lower body, which I like, which helps it lead into a very nice transition where he actually starts turning towards the ball with the upper body slightly behind the lower body. Compared to the video on the left, you can see into a transition, his upper body stays way ahead of the lower body. This doesn't look very powerful. His legs aren't very strong. Legs are much stronger on the right here. And as he goes through the ball, he's very cramped at impact because of all that poor backswing stuff. The downswing just becomes a big compensation movement. And then the video on the right, you can see his upper body is slightly behind the lower body, which it should be at impact. Much, much better. And you can see it's much less flippy too through the ball. So I love what we've done in this first lesson. I'm going to show you guys one more time in normal speed. Big changes. That's not very good on the left. much better on the right. So that's how you guys can go about this. Hopefully this video helps. This guy, the issues that this guy showed up with is it's a very common thing. I've seen a lot of amateur golfers who struggle with their ball striking. So hope that helps. That's step one with the setup, the grip, and some backswing stuff. Again, this might not be the video for everybody, but this video should help a lot of people. So any questions, leave it in the comments below. We're going to have the next few videos of the series talking about some downswing, talking about some variations of the downswing in terms of what you want to try to do, and then maybe into the finish as well. So hopefully that helps. Any questions, leave it in the comments below, and we'll catch you guys next time. Thanks for watching, everybody.